Hey everyone, Chris here from Maven Analytics, and today we're trying something brand new. We're going to have a skills showdown between Analyst and AI. So get excited, this one's a lot of fun. Alright, so there's obviously been a ton of conversation recently about artificial intelligence, especially in the data world. How useful and accurate are these tools? Where can they add the most value in our lives? And of course, the elephant in the room, is there some chance that tools like ChatGPT might replace human analysts entirely? So with these questions in mind, what I've done is prepared a dataset containing actual survey responses from employees in the state of Washington. I'll start by summarizing how I might begin to explore, analyze, and visualize that data. And then I'll upload the exact same dataset to ChatGPT's data analysis tool to see how well it performs given the exact same context. This will be a great way to compare and contrast how humans and AI tools approach the same analysis and expose some of the most common strengths and weaknesses. So with that, let's roll up our sleeves, take a look at the dataset, and start analyzing. All right, so here's the sample dataset that we're working with. I've opened it up in Excel. And again, these are HR employee survey responses. If you want to download this same data set or work through this on your own, this is actually part of one of our brand new guided projects at Maven Analytics. So go ahead and click the link in the video description to learn more. But basically what we have here is a unique row or record for each response to an individual survey question. Looks like we've got response ID, which should be a unique sequential identifier for each row. We've got a status column with complete or incomplete, a list of departments, got some binary fields for different roles like directors or supervisors, and then we have the actual questions themselves. Looks like there are 10 questions in the survey, along with response values from 0 to 4, and the associated response text as well. So it looks like a 0 indicates not applicable, 1 is strongly disagree, all the way up to a 4, which is strongly agree. Now, one important thing to note here is that I am somewhat familiar with this data already, and I did manufacture some QA issues for this demo specifically. And the reason I did that was because I really want to understand how effective tools like ChatGPT and ADA are at identifying these common data quality issues and correcting them as well. So what I'll show you here is kind of a quick abbreviated version of how I might start to profile and QA a data set like this. And then later in the video, we'll see if ChatGPT was able to identify all of those same quality issues. So personally, I love using tools like basic pivot tables for some quick exploratory analysis and QA. And I'm going to check a few different things here. First, I'm going to pull in response ID and a count of response ID. This is to make sure that that ID field is in fact unique and sequential. So if I sort that descending by the count, I should only see ones here. But in fact, I see about 15 instances of a response ID with a duplicate value. So one of those IDs is response 12. If we head back to the data set, you can see right here, there are in fact 2 identical records for response 12. And it's something we'd want to address by removing those duplicates so that they don't skew or bias our analysis. If we jump back to our pivot, next thing I want to do is actually look at the list of questions. So I can pull in the question into rows. This is going to give me a unique list of questions in the data set. And right off the bat, I see some strange things happening here. Looks like there are 2 instances of question 7 and question 10 as well. And if we look closer at question 7, we can see why that's the case. In one case, we've got an ampersand. In the other instance, we've got the word and written out. And then question 10, this one's another common issue, but much tougher to catch sometimes, which is that one of these 2 instances actually has this invisible trailing space, which is completely undetectable to the naked eye, but to tools like Excel or SQL or Power BI, this looks like a completely distinct and unique categorical field. So this is another case that we'd want to clean up to aggregate the results and standardize our text fields. Again, very, very common data quality issue in the real world. And then last thing I'm going to look for is blank values, specifically with my response field. So I can pull in response and the count of response. And you can see here we've got just about 100 records in our data set with no associated response value. And because these aren't really giving us any usable information for our analysis, these empty values or these blanks will definitely be something we want to address. So that's kind of the quick and dirty QA. Let's jump back to our survey response data tab and let's practice just correcting those very quickly. First things first, I'm going to select everything, remove duplicates. That should get rid of those 15 duplicate records, which it does. That looks good. Next up, we need to address our duplicate questions here. So first things first, for question 7, remember it was a matter of that ampersand. So what I can do here is select everything in column H and do a find and replace that ampersand with the word and. Go ahead and replace, changed 509 values in the data set. And to address things like leading or trailing spaces, one thing that I like to do here is actually create a new column and use something like a clean or a trim function, which automatically gets rid of those leading or trailing spaces. Let's apply it all the way down. In this case, I could keep my original values, or I could go ahead and paste over them as values and get rid of this helper column. And now ideally I should have just removed any leading or trailing spaces. We can go back to our pivot. We can pull these values out. We can refresh and then pull question back in and see what we see now. So let's sort these. And now we've got just that one instance of question 10 and that one instance of question 7. So that seems to have done the job. Last thing I want to do is address these blanks in the response column. Let's go ahead and just select those blank rows. Looks like the response text is blank as well. So we really don't have anything to even impute those values if we wanted to. So I can go ahead and just grab all of those filtered rows and delete them. And now we've just got our values from 0 to 4. No blanks in our response text field. And it actually looks like our status column is now only showing completed responses as well. So there you go. I've gone through my kind of basic data profiling and data cleaning process. Now I've got a nice tidy data set that we can start to prepare for visualization. So I'm going to go through this kind of quickly here, but what I'm going to do is create a new sheet. This is going to be my source data for a visual. Ideally, I'm going to want to use something like a Likert scale or a stacked 100% bar chart to show the different responses by question at the question level. So to set up my data for that, I want to pull the unique list of questions here in column A. I want to count all the responses of 1, of 2, of 3, and of 4. And then I want to take the average rating as well. And that's going to give me a good relative scale of which questions are people responding to most positively and also most negatively as well. That's really going to help me lead to some interesting patterns and insights that I could bring to the stakeholders as an analyst. So first things first, let's grab this unique list of questions. There are a few different ways to do it. In this case, I'll use a dynamic array function, unique, and I'm just going to select, it's not letting me use my shortcut here. I'm going to select all the values here in column H, like so, and that should give me my unique list from 1 to 10. That looks good. And now what I want to do is count the number of times a respondent answered question 1 or 2 or 3 with a value of 1. So to do that, I'll use a countifs function here. I could also do this with pivot tables as well, but I kind of prefer the flexibility of formulas. So my first criteria range is going to be my response value column right here in column I. And the criteria itself will be a value of 1. So I'm looking for records where the response in column I is equal to 1, and also where the question in column H is equal to the question right here in cell A2. Now I want to be deliberate about my reference type so that I don't have to write this formula over and over. I'm going to fix the reference to my ratings or my response values, which are always in column I. I always want to reference the value from the first row here, but I do want to leave my column relative. I'm going to fix column H In this case, I always want the question from column A, but I'll leave the row relative. So let's press enter. We get 25 responses of 1 for question number 1. I know what is expected of me at work. And now if I've done my job right, I can drag this all the way over and down, and that gives me the counts for every combination of response and question. Now, last thing I want to do here is to find the average response value for each of these questions. And to do that, I'm going to use an average ifs function. And the average range will be my response values in column I. And the criteria range is the question, column H. And I want that to match the question right here in A2. So again, I'm going to be careful with my reference types. Fix column I, fix column H, and fix the column A in my last reference here. Press enter, and I can apply this down. So here we've got the average response ratings. Let's drop the decimals down a little bit for each of these questions. The only catch is that, remember, we had zeros in our response column I, and a 0 is not a negative response. It's a response that's not applicable. So we don't want those zeros actually skewing our averages down. And to account for that, what we can do is add another criteria into our average ifs function, where we can say the criteria range is, again, column I, and the criteria is that it's not equal to 0. A little bit of a tricky syntax there, but when I do that, now you see my values change slightly. And this no longer skews those averages down because we're only counting responses of 1, 2, 3, or 4. So good example where that human intuition and that understanding of how surveys and survey responses work is really valuable in the role of an analyst. So with that, I've got the source data that I need. The last thing I'm going to do here is just kind of hard code this. I'm going to copy, paste as values. There are more elegant ways to do this. But the reason I want to do that is I'm going to add some filters here and then just sort descending by the average score or response. So now I can very easily see that question 1, I know what is expected of me at work, generated the highest average response or the most positive response. And on the other hand, question 6, I have a best friend at work, generated the lowest or the most negative average response. So that's valuable in itself, but the last thing I want to do is kind of bring the data to life, visualize it using some form of a Likert scale or a stacked bar, and that's going to really make my findings extremely clear. So to do that, let's grab all of these values. I'm going to go ahead and insert a 100% stacked bar, and let's drag it out. What this is going to do is show me each of the individual questions here on my y-axis, along with the counts of responses of 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, a couple tweaks I want to make here. You'll notice that question 6, the most negative question, appears at the top, and question 1 appears at the bottom. I actually want to swap that. So what I'll do is go ahead and format that axis and check this box that says categories in reverse order. That will go ahead and swap it. I can get rid of the title here. I would do a little bit more formatting here if we had more time, but the only thing that I really think is important at this point is to do a little bit of color adjustment for two reasons. One, I want to distinguish between positive and negative responses, and two, I want to use colors that are colorblind friendly as well, so I'm going to avoid things like reds and greens. So remember, these blue series here, responses of 1, these are very negative. So let's go ahead and format that data series. And I'm just going to give it a solid fill, kind of this dark orange. Responsive 2, which is somewhat negative, we'll use a lighter shade of orange. Responsive 3, somewhat positive, we'll use kind of this shade of lighter blue, maybe something like this. And then finally, for the most positive response, we'll use a dark blue like so. This is a pretty common color palette, these oranges and blues, for colorblind friendly reports and analyses. So I think this looks pretty good. I could do a bit more tweaking here just to do things like changing the gap width or the series overlay. I could add data labels as well. But I'm going to go ahead and pause there because I think this does a pretty good job visualizing the distribution of responses for each question and sorting them very clearly from most positive to most negative. Now, of course, as an analyst, the last thing that I want to do is actually take this to the finish line and translate these results here into some actual insights and recommendations for my stakeholders. So suppose I was taking this analysis to the HR director for the state of Washington. I might put together some recommendations to perhaps help with employee morale or improve things like connection or community, so that people who are answering questions like, I have a best friend, I've been given praise for doing good work, may answer these questions more positively in the future. So that's a good example of how I, as an actual human professional data analyst, would approach a data set and a use case like this. Next up, let's upload this exact same data set and provide the exact same context to ChatGPT, and specifically ADA, the Advanced Data Analysis tool, and see how artificial intelligence does trying to tackle this exact same case. All right, so now it's AI's turn to try to tackle this analysis. I've got ChatGPT opened up here, and because I'm using a pro account, I also have access to some additional tools like data analysis. This is sometimes called ADA or Advanced Data Analysis. It was previously called Code Interpreter, but the point is that you can upload actual data files here for ChatGPT to analyze and manipulate, and it can return things like tables and visuals. So it's a really, really powerful tool. And this is what we're going to use to see how well AI can approach this survey response analysis, just like I did as a human being. So first thing I like to do is start with a prompt that kind of sets the stage and provides valuable context. So let's do something like this. You'll be playing the role of a data analyst for the state of Washington. Your job is to analyze employee survey response data to identify insights and recommendations for key stakeholders. You'll profile and QA the data for common quality issues, conduct exploratory analysis, and visualize the data to clearly communicate your findings. So let's go ahead and send that message. Again, this is really just all about setting clear and accurate context to frame the conversation. So it says, great, I can assist with that. To get started, please provide that survey response data that you'd like me to analyze and other relevant details that could be useful. And then it kind of lays out the workflow, which really aligns with what I've described here. So it's going to start by profiling, QAing, doing some exploratory analysis or EDA, then moving on to visualization, and finally generate some insights and recommendations, which sounds pretty good to me. So let's go ahead and upload that data. I've said, here's an Excel file containing the survey responses. You can navigate to that file, let it load, and send that message. So right away, it's starting to ingest and analyze that data that I just uploaded. This typically takes anywhere from 10 to 30 seconds. I may speed it up just throughout the video, but it says, okay, the data set from the state of Washington's employee survey contains these columns. This is kind of nice. It's almost like a data dictionary to validate that ChatGPT is identifying and interpreting these fields correctly, which is a nice place to start. And then it kind of recaps these next steps. So what it's going to do is start with the data quality check, looking for missing values, duplicates. That's great. We'll see if it identifies some of those issues that we manufactured in the data set. Then it's going to go on to EDA and finally visualization. So here we go. It just analyzed the data quality pieces, and this is what it found. So there are 135 missing entries in both response and response text. There are 15 duplicate entries, aligns perfectly with what I found with those duplicate response ID values. And then it's got some interesting information about unique values in these categorical columns. And this is interesting. I've tested this a few times and it doesn't always catch this. So it does identify there are some inconsistencies in question wording, like question 7 and also question 10. That's really smart. And I wasn't expecting it to catch that. So let's see how it addresses that and if it kind of fixes that automatically or if we need to give it some additional guidance. But the fact that it identified that is really, really promising. What I love about this is that instead of just continuing on with the analysis kind of unguided, it's pausing and saying, okay, our next steps here are to figure out how we want to address those missing values, how we want to handle those duplicates, and so on and so forth. So this is my opportunity to kind of insert myself and share my expertise and help guide the analysis in the right direction. So let's prompt it with something like this. So I'm going to try to be really clear here. I'm going to say, please remove any duplicate records, along with any cases where response or response text is blank. Please also standardize the text for questions 7 and 10 to remove inconsistencies, i.e. change the ampersand to and for question 7 and remove the trailing space for question 10. Let's see if that does the trick. And in theory, this would solve kind of all three of those data quality issues that we identified in the human analysis that we just finished. All right, it's wrapped up its analysis, and it says this is how we've cleaned the data. Duplicate records have been removed. Those blank responses have been removed. Awesome. The text for question 7 and 10 has been standardized. It sounds like it standardized exactly how I described, which is great. And it says after these cleaning steps, there are now 14,575 records remaining, and that perfectly aligns with the number of records in my workbook as well. So really promising so far. That all sounds good. Now we're saying, okay, next steps for exploratory data analysis. Here are some things we could do. We could look for patterns, by department and role. It says, shall we proceed? In this case, I want to give it some pretty clear direction because I want to point it towards that Likert scale outcome where we're actually able to see the distribution of responses for each question. So let's kind of try to give it a prompt that will point it in that direction. So again, trying to be specific here, I'm going to say, please calculate the count of response values 1, 2, 3, 4 for each question, along with the average response rounded to 2 decimal points. Return the results in table format with questions sorted descending by average response. So I'm really trying to replicate that same kind of source data table that I created in Excel to see if we can compare and contrast our results. So let's see if this does the trick. All right, just completed. And it says here's a table showing the count of response values. Looks like it is including a count of zeros as well, which I didn't really want here, but that's okay. Along with the average response rounded to 2 decimal points. Questions are sorted in descending order by the average response. Okay, so it's producing this table here, and it does look to be sorted descending. We see question 1 at the top of the list, followed by 4, 2, 5, which is mapping to mine as well. And it also looks like so far we only have one instance of question 10 and one instance of question 7 as well. We see question 6 at the bottom. So this is very, very close to what I've got in my list. And just starting to spot check some of these values for these counts. These do look like they align with mine so far. So that's really, really good to see, including the aggregated values for question 7 and question 10 as well. So that's awesome. Now, one thing that it didn't quite catch was the exclusion of zeros to calculate the average. And this is a really good example of where that human expertise and that domain knowledge is really, really important because I understand how surveys work and I understand that a score of 0, even though that's the lowest numerical value, aligns with a response of not applicable, which is not a negative sentiment. So I don't want it to skew my averages down. I was wondering if ChatGPT would kind of recognize that and automatically take those steps. But it looks like it included zeros in these averages. So let's go ahead and ask it to exclude the zeros just like we did manually. So I've said, please exclude responses of 0 from the average response column, since a response of not applicable doesn't indicate negative sentiment. It says, here's the updated table showing the count of response values for each question, along with the average response excluding not applicable. Again, it's sorted descending order by that adjusted average response. Oh, this is interesting. So it's actually adding a column instead of overwriting it, so I could see the difference here. That's helpful. 349, 329, 314, 314. This is matching my values exactly. So I have a high degree of confidence that it's performing those calculations properly. That's looking pretty good. We've got one row in this table for each question. We've got the counts that we need. We've got the average excluding zeros. Last thing I'm going to do just to kind of prep this for visualization is ask it to produce this table one more time without the counts for 0 responses and with only that new average calculation included. So I'll say, please remove the column containing counts for responses of 0 and only keep the new average response column excluding zeros. See if that gives us what we need. And hopefully this produces that same exact table layout and format that we used as the source for our Likert chart in Excel. So this looks better. So count of response values 1, 2, 3, 4, and only the new average response column should be sorted again in descending order. And this looks exactly like what I need. So let's let it go ahead and finish off populating this table. All right, so we've been able to replicate the same view that I built in Excel. Now let's move on to the visualization phase. And this time I want to actually give it a bit more of an open-ended prompt. So instead of saying, please use a 100% stacked bar or a Likert chart, I'm just going to say something like, can you please visualize this data? Because I want to see how good it is with understanding data visualization best practices here, and how clear the results actually are. All right, so it's done the analysis. Oh, interesting. It comes up with kind of a clustered bar chart here. It does have the questions, in that same order from 1 at the top to 6 at the bottom, which is good. I don't love the clustered version here. I don't think it's extremely clear, but it is accurate and it did visualize the data. So now with that, let's kind of point it towards perhaps a more effective visual type. So let's do something like this. So now I'm giving it more direct guidance. Please use a 100% stacked bar chart to create a Likert scale, showing the distribution of responses for each question. And a little bonus here, use colorblind friendly colors. So let's see if that is clear enough to get to the same output that we produced. All right, so it kind of dropped the ball here. It kind of gave me that clustered chart again. This isn't a 100% stacked bar. This is a clustered bar. These may be colorblind friendly, but I don't really think they are. Generally with colorblind palettes, you want to avoid greens and reds. So let's see if we can correct this. I'm going to say that looks like a clustered bar chart, not a 100% stacked bar. See if it recognizes the mistake and is able to self-correct here. There we go. So that looks better. It says here's the corrected 100% stacked bar chart showing the distribution of survey responses for each question. It says it's colorblind friendly, but I'm not really buying it. Again, with these greens and reds, these tend to kind of blend together. So I'm going to give it a little bit more formatting guidance here. The other thing I want to do that we had to do manually is bump question 1 to the top of the list, which had the most positive sentiment responses, and have 6 at the bottom of the list. So just reverse the y-axis. So let's go ahead and see if we can give that formatting guidance here as well. So please reverse the y-axis and update the colors to show negative responses 1 or 2 as shades of orange and positive responses 3 or 4 as shades of blue. And let's see if that gets close to our visual that we built. All right, there we go. So pretty close. I mean, I had reversed the shading on my blue bars, but it did reverse the y-axis. I'm getting the same exact numerical values, the same ordering of questions, and essentially the same visual, just with a few small kind of formatting and design tweaks. So last thing I want to really test here is, we can conduct the analysis with ChatGPT. It's done a pretty good job so far with a little bit of guidance and nudging. Last thing I want to do is see if it can actually translate this analysis into some meaningful, realistic insights or recommendations that we could actually take to a stakeholder, like a HR director, based on these survey results. So I'll say, based on this analysis, please come up with some key insights and recommendations for the HR director, which in this case is our key stakeholder. And right away, it's saying, okay, here are some key insights and recommendations. We've got high clarity on expectations, and that's based on the fact that the question, I know what is expected of me at work, question 1, received the highest average score. That makes a ton of sense. There's positive perception of supervision and mission, again, based on those average ratings. Here's some room for improvement, maybe recognition and growth opportunities. Lowest score was, I have a best friend at work, which indicates there may be a need for better social connections. And recommendation-wise, some pretty interesting things here. So enhanced recognition programs for employees, so acknowledgement from supervisors, peer-to-peer recognition, formal awards, great idea. Promote professional development, foster a stronger work community. This is awesome. So these are legitimate recommendations that do seem to directly align with the analysis that we conducted and the survey results that we were able to analyze. Really impressed with this because honestly, this is what really matters, right? It's less about the technical analysis and it's more about translating that into real recommendations that can move the needle or change the way businesses or stakeholders make decisions. All right, so that officially wraps up our analyst versus AI showdown. Let's take a minute to recap what we saw. Now, overall, I was actually really impressed by how well ChatGPT performed on this one. It did a really good job exploring and interpreting the source data, and the fact that it identified and corrected all the major QA issues, missing values, duplicates, even the categorical inconsistencies, was really, really impressive. Now, it did struggle a bit with the average ratings, not having the context to exclude those zeros from the calculation, and it took a bit of hand-holding in the visualization stage as well, but I absolutely loved the summary of insights and recommendations at the end of the analysis. Now, keep in mind, I was giving ChatGPT some pretty specific guidance with my prompts, which I was only able to do because I have the professional experience to know what to look for and the direction I'd like the analysis to take. If you're a beginner, or if you don't provide such clear instructions, it's much more likely that you'll see inaccuracies or gaps in the analysis. So my takeaway here is that while these tools are extremely powerful and can be incredible sidekicks or co-pilots for data professionals, you still need to be very, very cautious when you work with them. So will ChatGPT replace human analysts anytime soon? My answer is probably no, and that these tools really do still require a skilled operator behind the wheel. So drop me a comment, let me know what you thought of this video, and if there's anything specific you'd like to see next. Until then, happy analyzing.